I'm going to get on the right page here. Think about, okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our service, our Sunday school time. It's a special day of remembrance for us for 9/11, and it's really hard to think of how long it really has been already, but it's very fresh in my memory and many of yours, and it's hard for me to imagine that even Matthew was in college then. So, you know, we want to remember all those people and those. You know, we still just hear so many stories of families and how people had such an outpouring of love for them and helped them during this time, and how we were so strong as a country around those events. So we want to pray for our country now, that we could be strong again, like we were. It's another special day for us because it's Mom and Daddy's anniversary, and so. We're thankful for that, because if it weren't for that, it wouldn't be me and Sandy. So we're thankful that they got married and had us. And another thing I was thinking while we were singing this morning in the opening, if you weren't in here during that song, I think it was in the last verse, taught by the Bible, led by the Spirit, we'll walk the heavenly way. So let's all just get that in your head. If you don't want to sing it, because I'll be singing it in mine, but if you don't want to sing, you know, for me, I just like to sing everything. But if you don't want to, then just make that a little thing that you think about when you wake up and when you go to sleep this week. Taught by the Bible, led by the Spirit, we'll walk the heavenly way. So, you know, if we can use our Bible to instruct us, to make decisions and let the Spirit lead us, then we'll definitely go in the way that God wants us to, won't we? But we've got to do that. Now, today we're in Genesis, and I think we were last week too. And today's lesson talks about the twins, Esau and Jacob. And, you know, it's kind of funny. I don't know if any of y'all have done it before, or not funny, but I don't even know the word. It's just as you read the Old Testament, you know, if many of you are like me and you start out in January and you say, I'm going to read this whole Bible, you know, and then somehow I fall by the way every time. I can't honestly say I've done it yet. But when you read the stories and you really get into it, because sometimes, I don't know, maybe it's just my age, but as you read, you know, about the women having their babies, and now we, you know, think about our babies having babies and grandchildren and all that. But, you know, you think about this and you think about these little twins that were born, you know, and then you think about what happened to them as men, you know, and it's sort of like we isolate them in this little story, but then they grew into that other little story, the big story. But so many stories that shaped our background as Christians and you know, as we're descendants of these people. But Abraham, you know, think how old they were and how they wanted a baby and they couldn't have a baby. And then they did get the baby. And then God told him to kill him, you know, to sacrifice him, even after all that time to get this son. And then they said that. So now we're going to get into the children and that kind of thing. But we're going to talk about the twins today. And there was a thing I wanted to bring up. Let me get back here in the back. Have any of you ever said, if I could just something, then I would something else? You know, like maybe you're real hungry and you think, man, I'd just give anything for whatever it is that you want to eat or something. Sometimes when you come in the house and you're just really hungry, or you're riding on a trip and you can't find an exit for the food place and you start tired of riding and you just want to go eat. Or now see, I'm centering it all around eating. Other things we would do, you know, if you've lost your phone and you think, man, if I could just find my phone right quick. Of course, maybe luckily you got another device and you can hit that find my phone thing and you can do it, but sometimes you just can't. But, you know, you think about how tied up we get in things and how impulsively we might just do anything to get what we want, and how many, you know, things have happened where people acted on that impulse and it changed their life forever. In the way that they acted on an impulse and didn't slow down and give it a little bit of thought because of their body told them to do this. You know, their carnal nature wanted them to do something, and if they just put a little spiritual prayer into it, it might not would have happened. But our book told us to think about that time, and of course what it's referring to, as we're going to read today, is about Esau coming in and being hungry, and what he does because he's so hungry, you know. But you know, we are guilty of often trading something that is better for something that's instant. You know, have you ever gone in the store with your kids or your grandkids and they'll say, oh, I really want this, and we hadn't even walked through the whole store yet or whatever, and you'll say, well, now, are you sure this is the thing that you want? Because now when we go over there, it might be that. And then you get over there, oh, no, I really want this. Or at Christmas, when the wish list changes on Christmas Eve, you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, it's just impulse and things that drive us. But today we're going to just talk about that. Our book talked about people being happy or unhappy. And it says that, I have never read this book, y'all, I'm sorry, I just hadn't done it. A popular English translation of Leo Tolstoy's novel, Anna Karenina, begins with the following observation. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Now, that's kind of an interesting thing, isn't it? But it says, it just highlights the thing that there's numerous factors that can tie into somebody's unhappiness. This person said that in ministering to families, they had seen that to be true, that when people are happy, their family's happy, it's generally because of their commitment and love to each other and their, you know, their dedication to the family and how they take care of each other. So there's love there. But then in families where there's turmoil, it can just be anything. It could be unfaithfulness or favoritism shown, or, you know, anger over something, or an addiction that causes one person to act out toward the others, or you know, maybe it's somebody dies and they don't like how the land was divided or the things were divided, and all of a sudden the greed and selfishness comes into our lives, and it's showing about the sadness that can be in our lives. But it says God is at work even in unhappy families. And this week's lesson introduces us to a family that experienced strife and conflict. And as a result, the directions of whole nations will be affected. So we're talking about Abraham, and they wanted a son, and he and Sarah could not have one. So we know that if you read those scriptures and thinking, you know, backing up a little bit, that, you know, they tried to take it in their own hands and had the handmaid to bear a child or whatever. But finally, they did have Isaac. And he said Isaac had other children with other wives, but he held Isaac in highest regard. It says Isaac eventually married Rebekah, and together they settled in the southern part of Canaan near the Sinai Peninsula. And so it says this lesson focuses on the account of the family line of Abraham's son Isaac. And it's talking about an account. And of course, as soon as I read that word, I thought about the old account was settled long ago. You know how it just pops in my mind like that. But an account is something that you need to pay attention to. And when they use this word, it says it reminds the audience to focus their attention on the story that's about to be told when they're going to give you an account of something. You know, and how you like to tell a tale or something, you know, you go on a trip and you come home and tell somebody that didn't go with you, well, let me just tell you how this happened, or, you know, if something happens to you. So it's kind of an account, but you try to get their attention. So we want to focus our attention today on the line of Abraham's son Isaac. So in Genesis 25, verse 19, Abraham became the father of Isaac. And verse 20, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean from Padam Aram, and sister of Laban the Aramean. Now he was 40 when he married Rebekah, and you might think that was an elderly bachelor even now, wouldn't we think that? I'm not going to say elderly because I got a son about that age, and there's Daniel sitting back there, and I know he's about the same age as Matthew. Exactly, so I'm not going to call y'all elderly by any means since I'm the mother of someone your same age. But he was 40 when he got married. Now, we have a nephew who got married, and he was older than 40. Sometimes it just takes you a while to find somebody you just really want to settle down with and commit to, doesn't it? He was 40 years old. So it says, and Rebecca, remember, if you'll remember the story, that they told them to go and to not pick, certain people, that the Canaanite women would not be appropriate for Isaac. There was some stipulations, but they still, y'all kind of had to marry within kinship, which is the same thing we do around here if you marry anybody around here, because we're all still directly, sort of kin, because a lot of us hadn't ever moved away. And when Doug and I got married, my grandma said, now y'all are kin. She did, but so far, it's turned out pretty good. Now, I don't know how it's going to go down with the next generations. If they get all the wrong gene that we might have had that could combine, it may show up later. But, Grandma told me about that, Grandma Garner. But, of course, it was through her line, anyway, that we were related. But he was 40, and they got married, and this daughter, Rebecca, was the daughter of Abraham's nephew. So Abraham's son, Isaac, married the daughter of his nephew, and I was trying to think about how that'd be. So that'd be kind of like if Sandy had a son who married my son's child. Wouldn't that be how it'd be? Something like that. Or a daughter, however. It'd be kind of close in there, wouldn't it? But anyway, they were related. And it says, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. So here it is. He's descended from Abraham and Sarah. Excuse me. And they couldn't have children for a very long time. He got married at 40, and now they can't have a baby. So he's praying to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. And she wanted to be. There was not a time when most people want to have children. I'm sorry, get this cough. But anyway, it had affected their family. And it told in our book about a family who couldn't have a child, and the writer of our book, and they said that they prayed. I'm just going to get a drink of water. Somebody say something. Jamie and Ian read. Okay, yeah. All right. So they prayed, this writer, they prayed for their friends who couldn't have a child. And y'all may know somebody like that, that's tried hard to have children, or it maybe waited a long time, and how joyful you are when that baby comes. I had to just, say how excited we are for that little girl. Because, that was prayed for and wanted. And these children were prayed for. So he prayed for his wife and prayed for Rebecca. And it says, the Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebecca became pregnant, verse 21. So it says the Lord answered him. Now, not only was she pregnant, but she had twins. It was going to be twins. In verse 22, it said, the babies jostled each within her, and she said, why is this happening to me? And then she went to inquire of the Lord. Now, for those of us who have had babies and we know how it feels when the baby moves, and you watch that. We used to watch Matthew's foot at night. We'd lay down, and it's like his foot just traveled like this, and we could tell it was his heel, and it was so exciting, And I think about that, but think about twins. I don't even know how that would feel for any that have had them. You would know, but she said, why is this happening to me? And it said, the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other. So you might think this answer from God would just set up a conflict. She's already worried about how they're moving around and maybe opposite, felt like they might be fighting each other before they're even big enough to start fighting each other, outside in the world. But he's setting up this conflict and he's telling her, but it says, the text does not immediately describe how the two people groups would come from her two unborn children. The Lord was not directing Rebekah regarding her future parenting practices. Further, the text is not describing a form of predeterminism which the people have no role or responsibility. Instead, God was describing the future realities of generations and therefore reinforcing the promise that Abraham would be the father of many nations. Because, see, he had promised Abraham that, and then it took so long to have that child Isaac, and now Isaac's having trouble. And so it's kind of like the future's just going on. It's hard for us to imagine with so many people, in the world now, but we think back as our world began, And 23b said, and the older will serve the younger. Which, sometimes the older one, usually leads and guides the younger child, and they kind of follow them. I know with especially with Mel's kids, with the four of them, each one of them's gotten faster doing stuff than the other one did. Now, Miller, it's just like he couldn't wait to do what everybody else was doing because he's been seeing them do it. He's just fast to me, and maybe it's because I'm older and I'm slower and he's faster. But, at 14 months, I think he's moving on. But, the kids, normally the younger watch the older, but this is a prediction that the older is going to serve the younger. And they had a word in our book that I've never heard. It's called primogeniture, Primogenitore. And it says the right or inheritance of the firstborn. So if any of y'all are the firstborn, then you could say, well, I have primogeniture. Because maybe you had certain rights as the oldest, or sometimes I think Sandy said that Mom and Daddy was stricter on her than they was on me. So, I don't know if that's a right or if it's a curse. So we just don't know, do we? But anyway, and then if you're in a family with a whole bunch, you just fall all in there. But it says Rebekah could have anticipated that her first child would receive greater status and acclaim than the second. However, the Lord overturned those expectations. Rebekah's older child would not receive the expected firstborn blessing. So in 24 and 25, it says, when the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they called him Esau. So they described him, as red and hairy, and so they used the name Esau to reflect this physical attribute of him, it said. His skin, his hair, both appeared red. You just think about a wild, red-headed, hairy boy. I don't know. It says... that it was a Hebrew word used to describe David's glowing health. Esau's hairy physique would become key in how he would lose his firstborn blessing. And y'all, as we go on, we know how they put the skins on Jacob. It says, after this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. So, you think about our Bible and how we have it, and God gives us His Word to read. Think about who took the time to give the detail of her giving birth. And, of course, it had to be somebody that was in there during the delivery, because I don't know that she saw it. And as the twins were being born, one of them was holding the other one's heel. Isn't that neat that it passes on, that we can hear this? And it says Jacob... The name Jacob is related to a verb concerning the act of grasping. So he was grasping his heel. Further, Jacob's name has similarities to the Hebrew word for heel, thus relating his name to his actions during his birth. But you think about it, you say, now listen, as I told you a little bit ago, to listen to this account. And if somebody said, I just want to tell you about when Rebecca had these babies, and the first one come out and it was just red. I mean, I get fascinated. Don't we want to hear when somebody has a baby? And the men may not want to, but the women, I think we do. You think, well, how was the delivery? How did it go? And all this, and they'll say, oh, I pushed for hours and hours, or somebody saying, oh, it was just so fast, or whatever. It's just different with each baby, of course, but this story is the account, and it gets our attention to hear how they were born. I mean, I can just visualize it. Can you? It's kind of like with us on the farm too. We get to see birth a lot, and my favorite thing on the farm, y'all, is just the new babies. The new babies, it's just like you just get all excited all over again. You just can't wait till the time comes when it's going to be time for them to have babies again. It's just amazing life in itself, and especially with farm animals as they're born, and most of them get right up. It's just amazing. But this is just as amazing as they were waiting so long for them to have these babies. And the next verse will tell us why. In 26b, it says, Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. So they got married when he was 40, so it took 20 more years before they had these babies. Now think about it. You think about people being, sometimes they'll say how a baby changes your life, and it does, no matter if you had it within the first year of your marriage or not, they change your life. But think about 20 years, and you're just used to the two of you or whatever, and then these twins come, and it's that many years. And since he's 60 and I'm 65, and I'm seeing at 65 how it is to run after a baby, think about it. So that was going to be life-changing, wasn't it? But there was a 20-year period of wait. In 27a, it says, the boys grew up. Now, think about them growing up. Then how many more years? How long do you call growing up? 10, 15, 20 more years. I just keep thinking about their age because I think about my age now. And think about their age. But they grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country. So he liked to go out and hunt, and that was important in those days, of course, for their food, and to bring in stuff for them to eat, and they had to grow their stuff. I think that maybe a lot of us in the past year have paid more attention to having things, if we could, from the garden, putting stuff away, that we won't have our own food. We don't want to be at the mercy completely of the food chain, do we? Or I'm not the food chain, but the supply chain, I guess I should say, because I think that is a manner of control, and that's just me saying that. I don't have any specific to back that up. But, we don't want to be completely at the mercy of what could happen to us, because just like the phrase I told you at the beginning, you might do anything if you're going to try to get food on your table. Do we want to fall for, I just really thought about this as I was doing this lesson, and thinking that if we become in a situation in our own country where that we are really struggling to get things to our home, and what might we do? Might we trade our salvation or denounce God or any of those things if we think, our life really truly depends on it? So it's just something to think about. And we say, man, he traded his birthright. But he was really hungry, as we're going to read in this story. But, I think it gives us a lesson today that we need to tie into it, that we need to stand firm. And we'll go back to what I said earlier about that song, taught by the Bible, led by the Spirit. Let's be sure that we don't ever get in the situation where we trade what we know is best for what is easy, or what will satisfy us quick. It says Esau was a skillful hunter, a man in the open country. In 27, it says, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. But now, it wasn't like he was just laying around doing nothing, Jacob. He was doing the things that needed to be done there at the house while Esau was out hunting. And it says very likely he might be cooking for the people that went. It says he preferred to live a life among the tents. As a result, he may have had the propensity for administration and aptitude later demonstrated by his son Joseph. Isn't it hard to think when we're talking about these twins, or it is for me, and when we're in this story, that later this Jacob is the father of Joseph, you know, and then you get all in that story. It's just hard to think about these family lines, or it's not hard, but I think we tend to kind of section it all off, but think about how it all just flows together in their life. Just like you say, well, Daddy always told us that my great-grandpa delivered stuff to Pinehurst. I don't really know what he delivered to Pinehurst, and I'm like, who knows? But when he came back, that the horses could come right back home, which was there where Mom and Daddy's house is, down the road where Aunt Essie's house is, and they just go right on back home at night. But that's what he did. And then my grandpa was a logger. And then they always told us that when Daddy was little, he used to take the bib down from his overalls, stick it down in his pants, and say, I'm going to be a businessman. So, I mean, but that's just generation, just like we're reading about in here. You know, you got Abraham, and then you got Isaac, and then you got Jacob, and then you got Joseph. And you just think about the stories as they go through, and the truths. I mean, it's not a story they made up, it's the truth of their lives. But it's just amazing to me to think about how all this unfolds. But he was there, and he was among the tents working. It says, Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So here we go. The daddy loves one, and the mama loves the other. Now, you know in your own families that different children will have a personality more suited to you than the other, because unless you and your husband or wife are just alike, you know, which usually we're not, you know, they have more tendencies to be one way or the other. But he, you know, it just tells that Isaac, you know, liked the wild game, that Esau was out hunting, and Rebekah just loved Jacob, and he probably stayed around and helped her, you know, and they might have said he was a mama's boy, I don't know. But he was there. And it says, Isaac's love for Esau and his hunting will be a factor in how Jacob and Rebekah plotted against Esau and Isaac regarding the father's blessing. It brings up Family Feud, and you know, if anybody ever watched that, and they talk about the feud of the Hatfields and the McCoys, but it says, you know, sometimes when there's certain families that don't get along, you know, and they say, oh, you know, we don't mess with them people or whatever because of what their grandma did or whatever. But this section, this is not a family feud. This is an inside the family feud. And a lot of times, y'all, we don't know. Our book points out, we don't know the struggles that people have at home. And a lot, you know, it's funny. Some people love to just tell it, or they'll put it on Facebook, my sister said that, or whatever, you know, but a lot of people keep things quiet, but they still have some struggles that we don't know about, you know, and this was an inter-family feud. I mean, here they are, the daddy liking one, the mama liking the other, but it's going on within their family. And our book said, feuds within families are often hidden from public view as individuals maneuver against one another in subtle ways to form or destroy alliances. Parental favoritism magnifies the problem. And our book said, do you see yourself in any of this? And if you think about it, you think, no, that would never be me. And our book says, if you answered no, would you be willing to ask somebody else if they agree in your self-assessment? You know, like somebody on the outside looking in, do they see it differently? And you know, it's hard. It's just hard to examine ourselves, isn't it? I think, you know, it's just easy to look at what other people are doing wrong, but it's real hard when we have to call ourselves out, and only, you know, we can do that. You know, sometimes when you just look in the mirror at yourself and you think, now, did you really say that? Or, you know, do that, or even just, you know, or do I really look like this? You know, I mean, sometimes we even think about that, and I think, oh, I should take better care of myself. But, you know, those kind of things, you know, sometimes it's hard to self-assess, but our book is challenging us to do that. And if we're taught by the Bible and led by the Spirit to walk in the heavenly way, we've got to do some of that sometime, don't we? In 29, it says, once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. So he'd been out hunting and getting all this stuff, but he wasn't out there fixing any of it. He was bringing it back in. So he came in, and it says this encounter might have occurred at a shepherding camp where they tended the livestock. And he was, you know, he went out to get stuff. he said to Jacob, quick, let me have some of that red stew. Isn't that funny that Esau was all red and he wanted this red stew? I thought it was. It says, I'm famished. And it says that's why he was also called Edom. But I guess because of his quick hurriedness. It says, instead of making a level-headed request, Esau sounded like a beggar. So it goes on into this, and Jacob replied, first, sell me your birthright, because we know Esau came out first and Jacob came behind holding his heel. So Jacob replied, sell me your birthright. Now you got to realize in this time that the firstborn's birthright would include a double portion of the father's estate. And Isaac was wealthy, and so it would have been a sizable birthright. And then Esau said, look, I'm about to die. What good is the birthright to me? In other words, if I don't get to eat right now, I'm not going to live anyway, is pretty much what he was saying. But just think about it. It was his physical urge that was prompting him here. And he said he was about to die. He was so hungry. And you know, we say that sometimes, don't we? We don't, any of us really mean it. But have you ever really gotten really, really, really hungry? You know, sometimes Doug will say, I'm going to wait and get really hungry so I can enjoy it better. You know, but think about it. We've never probably gotten into that position, but he's not thinking. He's hungry, and he said, what good is the birthright to me? But Jacob said, swear to me first. So he could have just gave him the bowl, and then there wouldn't have really been anything formal. But Jacob, he's thinking about this thing, and he's planning it. So he's saying, swear to me first. So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. It says Jacob made the deal permanent by having Esau swear an oath. In our book, it says the act of swearing an oath or a vow was not uncommon. Abraham swore that he would deal truthfully and kindly with Abimelech and his descendants. Additionally, Abraham's servant swore that he would not procure a wife for Isaac among the Canaanites. Let's go ahead and read the next verse. So it says, then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. And so Esau despised his birthright. So he gave it up. He was exasperated, but he got his temporary relief, is what our book's telling us. And he would therefore be able to get the transferred birthright. Our prayer says, Father, we celebrate that you have chosen to work through us, your people. Thank you for your faithfulness to us, even when we fail to live holy lives. Prepare us so that we can live out your purposes in the world. In Jesus' name, amen. And our thought is God's plans will be fulfilled either through or despite your efforts. So we can go and do what we should to walk in the heavenly way, or if we don't, God's plan's still going to come to fruition. But, we want to be a part of